This podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/Mapper Forward to find out how you can become a member today. Welcome back to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. I am joined again by Cosimo Libardo. We are talking about how profitable cafes and roasteries are today after we've had lots of changes over the past few years in our industry. Cosimo, today we want to talk about the barriers to profitability. We started covering some of that in the previous episode. Something I want to ask you is specifically on this subject is we have right now in our industry a huge labor shortage, and we're experiencing that labor shortage all over the world. And what I'm hearing from a lot of my consulting clients and a lot of the people that listen to this podcast is I just can't keep staff because of their mental health issues. And it's one variety of that kind of thing or another. And for the life of me, I never thought that would be a barrier to entry for profitability in our industry, where business owners are now responsible for managing their employees' mental health so that they can get them to show up and want to participate. And like what you were saying, it's really difficult to be happy all day, every day when you're a barista. So that's an example of like a barrier to profitability that we're experiencing in real time in our industry. What are some of the other ones that you see are a barrier to entry to profitability for cafes and for coffee roasters?
Well, I have mentioned in the previous episode that right now barriers are coming from many different directions. Let's say while the bar was very low before, now we got to get used to a situation where with crises that might happen and coming from different directions, the barriers might be random, limited in time, and always changing. And cost of labor, obviously, it's finding labor, so you have to pay more eventually. Could be one. The other one is definitely the need for higher rent from landlords. Cost of goods, it's the other major one. Espresso machines went up to the roof.
Yep.
Then if the roaster is paying for it, it's okay, but cost of metal, some parts are, all the microchips are hard to find. Delivery times, also in terms of logistics, getting a specific date to open, it's much more difficult than it used to be.
The building industry is going out of business. Like that's another example, right?
The building industry, but there are so many industries that randomly, because everyone, that's the point is everything was based on a sustainable model. Right now, or what was believed to be sustainable back then. Right now, we're in a situation where there are tensions on pricing, but even finding raw materials, it's becoming increasingly difficult. So all the pricing models that were built for a society, for a certain society, whatever that was, on what the people could spend, they're failing the new situation. They're kept there artificially that can last so many months. In the future, those tensions eventually will unleash. Everybody's talking about recession right now. So opening a business during recession time is definitely a much more, it's not impossible, will be a lot more challenging. And that's a fact. Is it something you wouldn't recommend someone to do? Obviously, I would tell them, be careful, think about what you're doing, have the right thought process behind it. And so what you need to do is basically develop a model on how to mitigate the cost of rent. So the barriers are going up from every direction. People, products, logistics,
inflation,
rent, everything will go up. In Europe, we have 10% inflation. All of a sudden, we had 10%. I don't know what the situation is in Australia right now.
Shit.
Yeah, it's similar.
Capsicums
I
are
would say,
$18 a kilo here. Like that's just peppers for the Americans in the crowd.
yeah, yeah.
$18 a kilo here. Tomatoes are $12 a kilo. Capsicums are $12 a kilo.
Yeah,
Like
so cost of food is going up.
everything's going up left, right, and center. They expect our energy is going to
So
double by the end of the
people,
year, same as what's happening in Europe.
yeah, so what's going to happen is that people will start consuming less because that will happen. And there will, until demand it's there, prices will go up. That's an
Mm.
unfortunate way our systems work, but
Hmm.
uh, when people will start consuming less or differentiate what they use, and obviously you're operating a specialty coffee business within that. Now, what I find is that businesses that have a premium and they're based on an experience tend to suffer less than tend to suffer less. They don't. I'm not saying they don't suffer. I'm saying tend to suffer less than businesses that don't have a premium to differentiate them from others.
Why do you think that
In
is?
Well, because people that want it as a luxury and not
Mm.
as an experience and a luxury. So that is the that is the type of consumer that we want to keep engaged with our industry right now, which are all consumers, by the way. Because in the meantime, the opportunity is the fact that it got a lot bigger. So yes, you'll have less people, or per capita, you'll probably have people drinking less coffee
Hmm.
because they don't have money to spend. From 3 coffees a day, they'll go to one, which will be the daily luxury. But there'll be more people requesting that one cup of coffee
Right.
eventually in the future. And so it compensates the per capita consumption is compensated by the amount of people that will actually, uh, let's say, order or request or want. During the pandemic, that got used. We were lucky that in the pandemic, in a way, might contain the seed of our survival as an industry, and that's because more consumers self-educated on how to make better coffee.
Yeah, YouTube was
That
their friend, right?
Well, who got killed by the pandemic was Office Coffee Service,
Yep.
which was based any coffee business that were based on mere commodity got
Hmm.
wiped out because consumers are not going to change behavior to go back to what was worse. There are interesting things like in America now, consumption of cold coffee it's it's
They're not.
growing as a trend higher than
Mm.
consumption of hot coffee, which
Mm.
is the only country in the world that has that right now. But it goes by generation. So Asia is growing in consumption of specialty coffee. Either they're specialty capsules or specialty coffee beans that are bought fresh.
Hmm.
Everyone has upped. They went from instant or tea to specialty coffee.
Hmm.
And so you have a lot more people requesting that kind of good. Obviously, in a scenario where we have those kind of threats, every cost that I can possibly think of will go up. But I have more people on the other side requesting specialty. How do I structure my business to
Hmm.
cater to that without incurring to this?
Hmm.
Well, I think the hospitality part I was saying before is one element, one
Hmm.
lever. Trying to create an hospitality experience that is manageable, sustainable emotionally for your staff. I also think that the people barrier, it's true and untrue. I think there is shortage and people got really that were working in food service, which wears you out, was wearing people out back then. Now has completely shifted away from that paradigm. We need to be treated better if you want us back. Some of them are thinking.
Hmm.
And that treatment and having managed the coffee business that had cafes, that was the conversation we were in back then
Mm.
in Toby's estate, how to retain talent and how to retain talent at every level. The biggest problem that in the food service, but let's talk about coffee shops,
Hmm.
baristas have, is they don't have a career ahead of them. They are paid whatever they're paid in each country, and that might vary a lot because if you're a barista in the US, you live out of tips. If you're a barista in
Yeah.
Italy, you make 900 euros a month at best, which is nothing. In Australian dollars would be $1,400 a month, which is nothing.
You can't live on that here.
Yeah, you couldn't even. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Not in Sydney.
If you're in Australia, you got the minimum hourly pay. Then there are many variations of that. What I'm saying is, we as an industry, and doesn't have to be a bigger, higher entity that does it for us, because we are creating our problems as well, because there are factors that are external to our industry, barriers that are external, barriers that we can manage because they're ours, we created them. And I think that treating people in a certain way, but rather than the economic part of it, which could be a factor, but you can't ask someone, okay, spend more money so you have more people. Well, that's someone that you don't need me to tell you, come here on the podcast and tell you, pay your people more. It's true. Sometimes coffee shop owners can't do that. It's not that they don't want to do that, especially when they're smaller. They tend to really look at people more as a family than just slaves. So I don't.
For some, it's same.
What I'm saying is that those are the two ends of the experience as an employee. You could be family, or you could be close to a slave, right? Those are the two polar opposites.
Yeah.
And those are examples, the categories that I'm creating just to give a reference, not because I think that's the case. I want to make sure that people know that. No, I don't think that's as no, but people right now, even if they wanted to have, they can't. So, no. It's not just practical to think of that. But what I'm saying is the biggest problem is not how you treat them. One of the problems can be how you treat them, is what path of growth you give. People will come work for you if they have a path ahead. And that path could exist, but nobody is working on it. Because I think teaching people hospitality allows them to find other jobs in the service industry.
Right.
Well, you teach them coffee, you just have them sitting in front of an espresso machine for the rest of their lives. Or become a Q grader, which eventually, one of them might find a job one day in a roastery or as a green coffee buyer, and a million of them will not.
Right.
Offering Q grading, has been a very valuable thing. Companies that do that for their staff are good because they care about the quality of the product they do. They care about giving an opportunity to their staff and trying to retain them. So you're investing quite a bit of money in your staff. The issue is that doesn't create a path in itself.
Right.
Or is not as sustainable as teaching them hospitality, which they could use in a restaurant of any kind. They could become restaurant managers. And that creates a career in the future of this world, because that's knowledge that is needed. More needed than we had, the reason why we teach grading is because today many businesses do, because that was something that was needed back then, because having someone brew good coffee was hard. There were few people good at it. And now with courses being everywhere, the technical part of brewing coffee has sort of been covered.
It's homogenized now.
Consumers at home,
they expect it.
You have YouTube, you can watch videos, the channels, and where it's readily available everywhere. And that's made it become not a problem, and not a point of differentiation either, not a point of attraction for staff. What is the new point? It's hospitality, teaching them hospitality, creating a model based on the hospitality experience. So how much staff am I going to employ for my business, for my cafe? Well, let's see what kind of experience I want to create, and then I go look. Many cafes are built before the workflow is studied.
Damn, of course they are. That's one of the biggest problems in our industry, is that people just do stuff and think about how they're going to figure it out later.
That's a barrier of entry. We create our
100%.
own. What I'm saying is there are barriers of entry that are external. If you design the cafe first and then you adapt the workflow to the cafe design because it's pretty, well,
it never ends well.
You should do the opposite. You should first think of the workflow and then find the space, the workflow you want. But that's why operators that already had cafes are more successful than the ones that are starting, because the ones that had cafes know what worked for them and didn't work for them. And that's when consultants can come in, but always get someone that knows a lot about workflow before you get someone that knows about architecture. Because the person that knows workflow will tell the architect or whomever, the builder, how to build stuff in order for you to become more efficient, serve more people in less time, and use less staff to do that. Not because I want to have less staff, but because
you want to be efficient.
That the staff that is going to be attracted in the future in cafes, if it's less, will have lower rotation, more opportunities of career. And then you can create a shared, well-thought experience about what you're offering.
100%. So we're going to head into the next episode, which is going to be beautifully tying the last two conversations that we had together, because over the past 6 years in this podcast, what we've been trying to figure out is who is making most of the money in the coffee supply chain. And so in the next episode, we're going to talk about where the profitability sits the most in the coffee supply chain. Join us for the next episode, folks. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon, and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.